Hello and good evening. I'm assuming this is working. Um, Today is the Vigil of the Feast of St. Ignatius Loyola. So it's the 30th. The feast day is the 31st. It is a memorial feast in most places, but in places that are Jesuit oriented, Jesuit high school being one of them, we treat it as a solemnity. So we're all pretty excited about that. If anybody would like to join this live stream, I posted the link in the chat. I don't know how to put it in the description, but maybe there's some way to figure out how to do that. I'm a little bit of a boomer when it comes to some of these things, so forgive me for not being able to put it in the description. It's up in the chat. Maybe I could paste it one more time just to make sure that it's not something that people could miss if they want to see it. Okay, very good. Yeah, so being the feast of St. Ignatius Loyola, I see somebody here, Bob the Builder, says, Father, I haven't seen you here in ages. It's true. I haven't. It's true. Life comes at you fast, and a lot of stuff is going on. It's kind of funny. This coming semester, I'm actually going to go back to teaching just one class. So I'm the president at Jesuit High School. That is a full-time job for sure. But if you stay away from the classroom for too long, what can happen is that you lose touch with the mindset of young people, which has changed over the years. I know that when I started teaching a while back, young people have changed a little bit since then. So I want to stay in touch with the minds of high school age boys, how they see the world, how they think, so that I can make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can as president. So I'm going to actually teach a course. The senior course is divided up into 2 semesters. One semester is sort of something that you might think of as like apologetics, so a lot of faith and science type stuff. And then the other semester is, we call it Christian vocations, but it is essentially the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola, and sort of like hanging theology off of that off of that structure, right? So if you're talking about sin in the spiritual exercises, we would talk about Christian morality or Catholic morality, moral teaching, how all that works. So I'm going back to teaching a little bit, and that's going to mean I have even less time. However, because I'm doing all the work to teach the class, I might be able to make some videos out of that, squeeze a little bit of video content out of some of the work that I'm doing there. So I am looking forward to going back into the classroom. So I see that you are going to be onboarding to teach in the Bronx. That's fantastic. Is that in the Bronx? Is that at Fordham? At Fordham Prep? At Fordham, is there a Jesuit high school there? I know there's Fordham, the university, but in the Bronx. But I wonder if you're going to teach at the high school, or maybe you're teaching at Fordham. I don't know, at the university. I don't know. I'm also enjoying a Dr. Pepper, 0 sugar, strawberries and cream as a as a way to celebrate the feast day of St. Ignatius Loyola. So that's a big deal. I don't know. I see more people are showing up now. I think this is great. Tom, you have been just such a nice person on the internet. Every time I see you, you always have something nice to say. You're always telling everybody, God bless you. I think that's wonderful. God bless you, Tom, and all the good things that you do. We're talking about Seton Education Partners. Okay, very good. I don't know much about them, but that's great. Another guy who's very often in going back and forth with me in the comment section of videos, Jimmy J's, Johnny Gibbers. Hey to you, man. That's great. I'm glad you showed up. That's really good. I have a number of people that I texted to show up, and a lot of them are in Rome right now, right? So a lot of people that I know who like to get online and make videos are in Rome right now. They have some kind of gathering. I don't know if it's like they call them influencers. I don't know if they all would call themselves that. I think they would call themselves Catholic creators on YouTube and on other social media. But we should pray for those guys when we get a chance, because I think that's a very important ministry that people dedicate themselves to. And the Vatican and the Pope would do well to pay attention to what's happening in those spheres. I often find myself interacting with people online. And it can get kind of wild sometimes. Some of the things that people say, it can get really, really wild. I'll give you an example. I think it was today. I think it's Sips with Sarah. said something. Oh, Cameron Riker says, "Pray for me." I most definitely will. I hope you're enjoying your summer and not getting too much sun. Sips with Sarah was talking about what Muslims think about our Blessed Mother, and I put in the comment section. I thought it was an innocent enough comment. I said, "Hey, when I was in Iraq, I had a Muslim woman. It's just a true story. She gave me some coffee, and when I finished drinking it, she took it from me, and it was like a cup on a little saucer, and she flipped it over and then pulled the cup up, and the remaining like kind of coffee dripped, the last little bit that dripped there. She read it, right? I don't know if this is some kind of occult practice or just like, I don't know what it is, but she looks and she says, this means that our Blessed Mother really loves you. This means our Blessed Mother really loves you." And she looked at me and was like it kind of shocked her that here was a Christian, because, obviously Muslims often, many of them have a devotion to our Blessed Mother. They don't believe everything about her that we believe, but they believe a lot of those things. And so she was sort of shocked that our Blessed Mother would love a Christian and a very clearly a non-Muslim. And I was just as shocked that this was that. Anyway, so I posted that little interaction in there, and later on, I told this woman, I said, "Listen, if you think our Blessed Mother loves somebody like me, maybe you should consider what it is that I believe, and consider that maybe you should believe it too," and all that kind of stuff. I didn't write all that in the text. Anyway, somebody said, "This is divination. This is an occult practice. This is did you go and get a spiritual cleansing after this happened?" Like, my goodness gracious, I have I don't know where people on YouTube get the get the gumption to just immediately go there in the comment section, but I guess that kind of stuff happens sometimes, Anyway, so let's see here. Who's here from Discord? I shared with Sips and Catholic Christian. I wish I understood what Discord was. Maybe somebody can tell me what Discord is all about. I one time got onto something I think was called Discord, and it was a pretty miserable experience. So I didn't stay there for long, but it sounds like some people really enjoy interacting there as if it's a place. I don't really understand it. But it seems like some people really like it and get a lot out of it. Maybe somebody can tell me what that's good for. Something tells me that it's not something I really would have time to keep up with, right? And I don't know that it would be ultimately productive for me, but maybe it is. So if you can tell me what that's all about, I'd love to know more. By the way, if you have not ever seen Cameron Riker's YouTube page, it's totally worth the time, right? I think I met Cameron and his wife and his little bitty baby. Good people. I think his content is good. It's mostly geared towards young men and helping young men become better men, and a lot of apologetics, a fair dose of apologetics as well. But I think Cameron's a good guy, and I think his channel is absolutely worth the watch. So when you get a chance, go subscribe to that guy. So Bob is saying what I think is Discord. He says it's like a big group chat. That's what it seemed like. It seemed, yeah. So I guess it kind of like a hangout place, maybe, like where just a lot of people are hanging out with no particular topic to talk about, except that it's associated with one like creator or one topic or something like that. I don't really know. I don't really know what it's all about. Okay, so I want to know when you think a young man is ready to date, and how he can use Ignatius's principles to know this. Well, okay, so let's see here. The principles that St. Ignatius Loyola lays out sort of follow some basic concepts that, for example, number one, there are these movements inside of us that pull us in these different directions, right? Sometimes it's from the good spirit, meaning from God, like God is trying to lead you. Sometimes it's from the evil spirit. This is the enemy of our nature, right? This is the one who was part of the fall, and this is the devil that we're talking about. And then sometimes it's just inner things that are happening to us. So, for example, let's say a hormonal teenage boy, right? So you have just kind of inner things that which, by the way, can be formed a lot by one of the first two causes, so the good spirit and the evil spirit, right? It's very important for someone then to become indifferent to any pushes or pulls except for that which comes from the good spirit, right? It's very important that we overcome ourselves, right? The spiritual exercises talk about para vencer a sí mismo, right? To overcome yourself, right? That you become free by being able to only be listening to the good spirit and to push away the evil spirit and not pay too much attention to anything that's not coming from God. So the answer to when is a young man ready to date, I think it's whenever he is has the kind of self-control to be able to say, hey, I can engage in that productively, right? I think that there's a time when for a young man when all things that girls do are silly or gross or whatever, and then they move into this other thing where girls are fascinating, and then it moves to where it's like a guy can go kind of girl crazy if he's not careful. And so I would say that the age when a young man is ready to date is an age when dating can be productive. And productive dating, that's a courtship, right? So you would have to say that like you would be moving towards being ready for marriage. Now that doesn't mean that like, okay, let's say you're 16 years old and you say, well, I'm not ready to get married at 16, so maybe I shouldn't date. That's not it. It would be a question of like, can dating right now at 16 years old help make you more ready for a lifelong committed relationship with someone? And I think that is possible, but I also think it's not a bad idea to hold off either. It's not a bad idea to say you're not ready and that you're not mature enough and that it won't be productive if I date someone. That's not a bad idea. I do think it's probably good to socialize with females when you're younger in a broader sense, in a less pressurized sense of like a real one-on-one date or something like that. But, so going to high school dances and things like that, that can be great. But like having a girlfriend, I would say you would need to be the kind of person for whom dating can be productive. I hope that's helpful, Cameron. I hope that makes some kind of sense to you. I would ask, that's the kind of question I would actually ask you. But if you're talking about Ignatian principles, I would say that being able to say that you can do a discernment of spirits that's productive, that you ultimately say this is for God's greater glory. Very often we think of the moral life as, hey, I have to avoid the bad things that are on the list of like prohibited things, right? That which is haram, I cannot do it. I have to stay away from the pecados, and that's not a bad way. That can be helpful, but it's even better if you ask yourself, what did God make me for? And am I choosing of the good things that I'm choosing? So some things are bad and you should never choose them, but of the good things that I'm choosing, am I choosing that which glorifies God the most? Like, is what I'm doing glorifying God more than the other choices that are out there? Very often we make the mistake of thinking like, okay, what's the least I can do and still make it into heaven? Like what's the least I can do is still make an A on the test, so you can get away with less studying somehow. And I think that's a pretty bad temptation. So to fight that, we should ask ourselves, of all the good things, of all the choices out there which are good, which of these choices glorify God more than the other choices? This is where the Jesuit slogan ad maiorem Dei gloriam comes from, right? For the greater glory of God. Greater meaning greater than all the other things that glorify God. I want to glorify God with that which is the greatest option, which glorifies God more than the other options. So when we're asking a question, what's the right moral thing to do? What's the right path to be on? Your answer needs to be that which is ad maiorem Dei gloriam, that which glorifies God more than those other choices that are out there. That's going to be your sort of central Ignatian way of looking at those things. When you live your life that way, you will find that it's hard. You will find that there are a lot of difficulties, but doing that consistently builds up the kind of virtue that I think you need to be successful at avoiding all those sins I was mentioning earlier, all those other, that list of things that we're supposed to not do. You're going to get better at not doing those things if you're constantly pushing hard to do the right thing, to do not just the right thing, but like that right thing, which is better than all the other right things. Ramses Flores, I know I've interacted with you back and forth in the chat before. I'm very glad to see you here. So far, it's only good people showing up. That's good. If any of you wish to join the StreamYard live stream, feel free to. I assume that it's gonna that StreamYard here is gonna tell me there's somebody that wants to join the StreamYard if there is somebody that wants to join the StreamYard. I'm sort of looking at the, I don't know what you call this, but the interface of StreamYard. What do you call this? The presentation room, the green room, whatever you call it, or whatever. So anyway, if somebody wants to join that, you're welcome to join that. We are celebrating all things related to St. Ignatius Loyola, including the Jesuits. Something has happened on the internet recently. It seemed like maybe 5 years ago, when I said that I was a Jesuit, I would immediately get attacked by everybody. I mean, absolutely everybody would say the Jesuits are terrible, right? The Jesuits are just absolutely terrible. They're the worst. And for some reason, everybody was like, they're Molinists. The Jesuits are all Molinists, and Molinists are terrible. I don't know what happened, and I think I know kind of what happened, but something happened where the Jesuits are less hated by everybody. I think people still get very disappointed in some of the things that happen that have the word Jesuit associated with it. Either it's a Jesuit that does bad things, or it's a Jesuit institution that does bad things, or whatever. I think people still see that, but it's a lot less cool to say that the Jesuits are the worst thing on the planet. And I am thankful for that. I'm thankful for that little small movement in a better direction. I think maybe some YouTube influencers have seen the light and stopped just absolutely bashing the Jesuits every chance they get. At least some of them. Some of the cooler YouTube influencers have bashed the Jesuits a little bit less, and I'm very, very thankful for that, for sure. It was getting it's sort of tiresome to know that, you know, you're doing what you think God wants you to do. You join an order. You're there because you think God wants you to do that. You pay the price, that there's the price for all this, and then you find out that having SJ after your name sometimes makes ministry even harder, and that's disheartening. That can be disheartening sometimes. I have thick skin; like, it doesn't hurt me like personal insults, you know, take me down when people say bad things about either me or the Jesuits or whatever. But it's more like, oh man, I was hoping that, you know, being a Jesuit might even open up doors for better ministry. And instead it's like, well, I know I can depend on the Jesuits to have formed me well and made me ready for ministry. But, you know, society is what it is. We live in a society, you know. Okay, so let's see here. I love the Jesuits. They, in large part, evangelized America. Hey, man, they evangelized the world. You're right. They evangelized America. They evangelized the world. There is, it's hard to find. So St. Ignatius Loyola is born the year before Columbus, discovers America, before Columbus makes his voyage across the sea and discovers America and opens up America for the Americas for the West. I mean, for the East, for what is further, for Western Europe. Okay. Or really for the rest of the world. And so the Jesuits are their population is exploding as opportunities to evangelize the Americas, and also to be missionaries in the Americas, but also in China, really all over the world. The Jesuits wind up everywhere, and that goes on pretty strong. That pushing hard for the church goes on is a pretty big deal, pretty strong, all the way up until this period that is called the suppression. The Jesuits call the suppression. So the Pope basically said that the Jesuits no longer operate in the good graces of the church. So he disbands the Jesuits, and they are disbanded. This is like in the 1770s, and they are basically shut down. Governments take over the Jesuit properties and the Jesuit institutions that were out there, which was pretty tough. And the only place that didn't happen was in Russia, where Catherine invites all the Jesuits over to Russia and says, we think that Russia is falling behind in the middle of all this big enlightenment, and we think that the Jesuits might have something that they can share with us, and so we want them to come and teach in our universities and help us like catch up with the world as it is becoming enlightened, right? And so the Jesuits never were completely out, but that lasted for about 40 years, a period of about 40 years. And so then the Jesuits, the world was opened back up again to the Jesuits after that, of which they had a big vocations explosion following all that. But the opportunities for missionary activity shrank by a lot after all that. So there you have it. Let's see here. Waffle Wrangler. My wife is a graduate of Loyola, New Orleans. She is wondering if you ever visit the school or have a relationship with them. So the Jesuits, the Jesuit community that I am part of is made up of Jesuits that work at Manresa Retreat House in Common, Louisiana, Jesuit High School, Immaculate Conception, Holy Name of Jesus, and Loyola, right? So all of those Jesuits are all under one superior. So I'm part of that, the Jesuit Loyola community. I'm on the board at Jesuit Loyola. Believe it or not, I am a board member of Jesuit Loyola. So I'm aware of those things that board members would be aware of. I don't teach there. I don't minister there. I occasionally I'm on campus for board meetings and things like that. So I'm aware the way a board member would be aware of what's happening at Loyola, which has a lot to do with things like admissions questions and budgetary questions, and every now and then we'll talk about things like mission and all that, or like if we had to hire a president not that long ago, but I don't teach there or anything. So there you have it. Good to see you, Father. Good to see you, Ronan. All right. Hello, Father. I am drawn to a Jesuit vocation. Well, God bless you. Due to their history of evangelization, but I'm drawn to the traditional liturgy. Do you think these two wants are in conflict? Well, I would say being drawn to the traditional liturgy is a good thing, right? I think being drawn to anything that is holy is probably a good draw. And so I would say that I would never say that that's a problem for you as a Jesuit. The bigger problem would be if you think that God is calling you to celebrate the traditional liturgy only, that you're going to have a hard time being a Jesuit, in the sense that the Jesuits have to be able to go wherever we are sent. And these days, there are not a lot of places that we get sent where the traditional liturgy would be what you're going to be asked to do in terms of ministry, right? So here in New Orleans, the traditional Latin Mass is celebrated at St. Patrick's, and there are two priests that celebrate that Mass there, and one of them is a Jesuit, right? So it's not like the Jesuits somehow are never called upon to celebrate that liturgy. But I would say if you feel like, I think my vocation is tied up in the traditional liturgy, I mean, the Society of the Fraternal Society of St. Peter's probably what you might be looking for, whatever. But those guys are not in the same are not trying to serve the church in the same way that the Jesuits are. They have a different sort of call, a different sort of mission given to us from the church, and especially from the Pope. The Pope does depend on the Jesuits to do so many different things that you would have to be willing to do it all, right? So I would say that any Jesuit should be willing to celebrate the traditional liturgy if we're called upon to do it. I've been recently called upon to celebrate the Byzantine liturgy. Recently, meaning going on a year and a half or so ago. I became bi-ritual to celebrate different liturgies, but that's because I was called upon to do it. We should all be, any Jesuit should be called upon to do it. And that's what makes us good missionaries, is that we can show up at any place and say, okay, whatever the circumstances are that I'm in that keep changing all the time, I find a way to evangelize in those situations. And if you're asking me if you're wondering whatever made me want to become a Jesuit, it was reading about those Jesuit saints who did exactly that kind of stuff historically, of evangelizing. All those saints, man, there's so many Jesuit martyrs who gave their lives. So many Jesuits also who had a sort of a checkered past, and the Jesuit order found a way to form these men and make them useful to the church to spread the gospel. That to me was what impressed me so much. So I would say that I feel just like you, but I wouldn't say that I'm only called to any particular form of the liturgy. I'm called to wherever I find myself. So I would think anybody who wanted to be a Jesuit would want to be, the word we use is disponable. You'd want to be disponable, meaning you can be sent anywhere to do anything. And that's the mark of a good Jesuit vocation. If you feel like, hey man, I really kind of get excited when I think about how I might be sent to do anything, anywhere. So God bless you. I'm going to include you in my prayers, you and your discernment in my prayers. If you ever have any questions, look me up. Let's see here. Does the Ratio Studioum Does the Ratio Studioum? I bet you meant to say. Okay, I see your next. Yeah, I see your next comment, which says, "Does the Jesuit order still follow the Ratio Studioum, or some variation of it?" I have the Ratio Studioum right here near me. I'm not going to reach down and grab it. But yeah, Claude Pavor, Father Claude Pavor, S.J., who is a graduate of Jesuit High School here in New Orleans, recently did a fantastic translation and commentary on the Ratio Studioum. Totally worth a read. It is a genius document that sort of gives a playbook to education. It's a little bit different just because the way that colleges and the way high schools and universities have kind of broken into two separate sort of mission territories, if you can think about it that way. And so you can't apply it all in every circumstance, but boy, there's a lot there that's really, really good. I think that those who put that document together, and the fact that the Jesuits put it together is a sign of like the way that the Jesuits do things. There's always a huge flexibility with the Jesuits to be able to arrive on the scene, sort of take account of what you see in front of you, meet people where they're at, kind of get into the hearts of people and all that sort of stuff. And at the same time, the Jesuits produce like rules and systematic documents that attack a problem in a very systematic way with a plan. And I think, if I had to say what makes the Society of Jesus tick, that sort of approach is a big part of it. The Ratio Studioum saying, how are we going to educate others? The first schools that the Jesuits opened were to educate themselves, right? To educate young men and form them for the priesthood. But very quickly, especially whenever they had big donors who would come in and say, hey, I'm going to help you build this college if you allow my son to also study there, right? That's how we ended up opening the doors to educating everybody. St. Ignatius' sort of first vision for the Society of Jesus was not necessarily one of education, but pretty quickly it became that, right? It became that pretty quick. Let's see here. We have Cameron Riker. My vocation is to be a dad, not a YouTuber. I mean, listen, lots of dads, especially with dads with webcams, have had a giant impact on the YouTube world. So I think a dad with a YouTube account can be a powerful thing. And God can call us to do all sorts of things. Our vocations can be multifaceted, Cameron. I think you're doing all the right things here. All right. So Arnie says he'll. Okay, great. Like I said, I'll continue to keep praying for you there. Let's see here. Most people confess the same sins over and over again. As a priest, do you have any advice on how to eliminate habitual venial sin? It really depends on the sin. It really depends on the sin. I think St. Ignatius has this great thing called a particular examen, which will help you overcome particular sins. And he's got a couple of different methods that are worth looking at. One of them, for example, he really wants you to understand that there's really not. It's hard to expect there to be one simple trick. Now, God can do anything through grace, but it's hard to expect that there's one simple trick that if you just do this sinful thing will just go away, right? So really the way that we overcome sin, typically, like the normal way that we overcome sin, is that number one, we've got to learn to hate that sin, right? We've got to absolutely learn to hate that sin. I always think of this analogy. If I baked an apple pie, right? And let's say you like apple pie. Boy, does that apple pie look great. And you can hardly turn down a piece of apple pie. And I showed you an apple pie and I said, look at this apple pie. And you said, man, I love apple pie. I said, man, I made this apple pie. And when I was baking it, I inserted into it a cat turd, right? Some feces from a cat. And I put it into this pie. You would have no problem not eating that pie, right? You'd have no problem turning down apple pie if you knew that there was a piece of cat feces inside that apple pie, right? That's how we have to think of sin. We may say, look, I got to admit, I like X, Y, and Z about this sin, but there's something poisonous in there. And it's so poisonous that it disgusts me to even think about it. Like I lose my appetite for it. That seems like the surest way to begin to overcome a sin is to first of all, learn to absolutely hate the bad parts that are in that sin, right? Learn to hate it. And if you notice, a lot of sins that are habitual, a lot of sins that don't seem to go away as easily as you might want them to, are because they don't seem to hurt anybody else. Or maybe you can do them in private where nobody knows about it. Maybe they even make you feel for a moment that you are more normal. When you're involved in this sin, people might even think that you're, that you'd be abnormal if you didn't commit the sin. Those sorts of things. Those are the hardest sins to overcome because it's hard to find the cat turd, right? It's hard to find the part of it that makes you say, okay, I absolutely hate it. And you say, well, the church tells me this is wrong, but I don't know if I see all the wrong parts of it all that glaringly. So do whatever research you have to help you learn what is wrong with that sin and the problems that it causes and all that. And you can begin to say, man, I'm disgusted. I'm totally disgusted by that sin. Then you sort of embark on a real journey, okay, of overcoming that sin, where you recognize the grace in your life that can be partial in this way. Let's say the frequency with which you commit this sin might be reduced. Well, you have to thank God for that. A lot of times when we sin, we go straight into depression and we say, oh no, I fell again into the sin. There could be nothing worse. Oh, I'm the worst. Well, now that I have to confess this in my next confession, I might as well sin again and again and again with the same sin because I'm going to have to confess it anyway. What a terrible way to look at it, right? Instead, we should say, oh man, I fell into this sin. I am truly sorry. But boy, I need to be thankful for the grace that I got that between this time that I committed the sin and the last time was an even longer period than before, right? And so you keep watching that period between committing that sin grow, and you keep seeing maybe the intensity of that sin lessen, right? So it goes from, totally premeditated where, you planned it all out and you committed this sin and you knew it was wrong, but you did it anyway, all the way down to, man, I just couldn't help myself and I finally fell into the sin or whatever. And it sort of felt almost spontaneous, whatever. That's a movement in a better direction. And so St. Ignatius even says, write down when you commit the sin, but every time you commit the sin in a less intense way or less frequently, write it down smaller and smaller. And that way you can look back and see the progress of overcoming that sin. Way too often we have this idea that like we should always try to to stop sinning cold turkey. We should always like try to go cold turkey, but don't be shocked when cold turkey doesn't work and you have to like slowly come away from a sin. Don't be shocked when the cold turkey efforts fail, but that failure is not the same kind of failure as if you actually give in and say, I don't care if it's a sin or not. So allow yourself to feel the progress that you make and allow yourself to notice that progress, maybe like by writing down the sin and you keep writing it smaller and smaller, the less intense it is or the less frequently that it happens or whatever. And you'll find yourself able to look and say, oh, I feel and I see the results of grace growing in my life. I think those kinds of things can really help us overcome those habitual sins that many of us struggle with, right? I hope that's helpful. Let's see here. Let's see. Let's go in order. Hello, Father. What's the best way to treat scrupulosity? Let me tell you what St. Ignatius Loyola said, right? He said, he first of all said, scrupulosity, recognize that many saints suffer from scrupulosity. So don't act like scrupulosity is the worst sin there is, right? Don't walk around thinking, oh, my only sin is scrupulosity. I mean, that's probably not true, right? Scrupulosity means, the best way to think of scrupulosity as you are so worried about a sin that you sort of are unable to do what God really wants you to do, right? St. Ignatius describes it as, imagine you're in a barn and you look around and there's straw all in this barn. And many of the pieces of straw fall on the ground in the shape of a cross. And you say, I can't leave the barn because I'll have to step on the cross to be able to leave the barn. So I don't want to step on the cross. That would be a sin. So I'll never leave the barn. And it's like, man, God calls you to do something outside of this barn, right? You have responsibilities and duties as a Christian outside of this barn. So there's no way that God, won't let you walk out of this barn. So it's sort of like to see the ridiculous nature of scrupulosity, where you're sort of frozen and unable to act in a positive way because you're so afraid of the sin that you might commit. So how do you overcome that scrupulosity? Well, knowing is half the battle, like recognizing what scrupulosity is holding you back from, right? There are smaller tricks, like I think of St. Francis of Assisi. If I'm not mistaken, he was somewhere in the Middle East, and they was in a tent somewhere. And I think one of the carpets that he was on had a bunch of little crosses on it. And he was like, people were going to freak out if he walked across the carpet because they all had all these crosses and he was going to somehow defile the cross by stepping on it. And so he says, well, that's actually the cross of the unrepentant thief. I don't mind walking on that. So he sort of tricked his mind into saying it must be okay to be able to do this. And the truth is, it's not a sin to walk on a carpet that has something like the figure of a cross on it when you're not meaning to commit a sacrilege. So again, it's like allowing your intellect to see past whatever twisted gut feeling that you have that's really disordered, that's out of order, with scrupulosity, right? So I hope that's helpful. Which of the Jesuit values do you feel most drawn to? I'm drawn to it because it's the most, it's the one I need the most. It's not because I have mastered it, okay? But it's this sense of abnegation. St. Ignatius Loyola says that this is the sacrifice, the best sacrifice we can offer God is abnegation, for us to sort of take our own will and say, I'm not even going to have a will anymore. I'm going to submit to that legitimate authority in my life, which in my case is a local superior and a father provincial and the Pope and the church and all those kind of things. That we would say, I don't judge what they ask of me. I just simply receive it. And I receive it in devotion to Christ, right? And I say, Jesus, this is how I'm going to show you that I love you, right? This is how my love will manifest in deeds and not just in words. I will give up my own will and I will do what I'm told by my legitimate authorities, right? Legitimate superiors. That is, I value that in above all the others because it's so hard. Because it's so easy for me to sit here and say, well, that was a dumb thing I'm being asked to do. Or, or my superior doesn't know what he's talking about when he says this, or how could he be so wrong, or whatever that is. By the way, if my superior is watching, I never think that about you. But, sometimes we can be judgmental and think we know everything. And I want that perfectly so badly that I would have to say I value that. I value that the most. Thank you for asking that. Sips with Sarah. God bless you, Sips with Sarah. I love your channel, by the way. You always have something really, really interesting to say. I greatly appreciate it. I'm glad you're on YouTube, right? I really am. I find it boring to get stuck in the same sin. I think it's more difficult to realize the subtle sins when we get rid of the obvious ones. Isn't that the way it works, right? That's just the way it works in such a mysterious way that the closer we get to something like holiness, the more we recognize how far away from holiness we really are. And there's something of a paradox there, but I think that it's God calling us to perfection. And I know perfection is a dirty word for a lot of psychologists. A lot of people, and will tell you that perfection is the wrong way to talk about it, but it's the old-fashioned way of talking about it. And I think it's right. I think it's better to see God as this horizon that we are looking to be in union with, and we will never be the uncreated God, right? We are creatures and God is not created, but we find ourselves drawing closer and closer to that infinite horizon, which is farther and farther away from all these sins that we struggle with, right? So I feel you, Livia S. I feel you. Waffle Wrangler. Also, my wife loved her time at Loyola. Oh, great. She was there from 13 to 17. Her favorite is find God in all things, both great and small. Father Vasic was a great spiritual help. Father Vasic. I lived with Father Vasic in Boston, back when he was in Boston. And I'll tell you, he and I see the world in some very different ways, right? We see the world in some very different ways. But golly, I couldn't help but develop an affection for that man. He definitely loved Jesus. And so I loved him. I really did. I loved him. Good man. Let's see here. Axiom of choice. Hello, Father. Are the Jesuits exempt from the local prelate? No, we are not. We are invited by the local bishops and archbishops to serve somewhere in their diocese, but we are absolutely, they are our boss in many ways. They have to give us, as a priest, I depend on the local bishop to give me faculties, right? So to be able to even celebrate Mass in public and all of that. Now, the Jesuits do have one special privilege here that might be interesting to you. Most of the time when a diocesan priest is going to move from one diocese to, or he's visiting a different diocese, one he's not part of, he has to let that bishop know that in the diocese he's going to go to and say, hey, I need your permission if I'm going to celebrate Mass and all of that. Technically speaking, a Jesuit doesn't need that. If he has faculties in one diocese where he is assigned, he has faculties everywhere, even if he were to leave that diocese. Now, we still send a letter of suitability to those bishops just out of complete courtesy, and I think they want us to do that, and especially to make sure that, that if they see a guy in a collar and they don't recognize him, they want to be able to recognize him and know who is that guy in my diocese? Is he a real priest? Because there are fake priests out there, So the Jesuits do have that privilege of being able to still have faculties to say Mass anywhere in the world if they have it wherever their actual assignment is. But we still send a letter of suitability. But we are absolutely we are not exempt from any local bishop. Right? We're under them. Now, I'll tell you, I think the bishop thinks about Jesuits individually a lot less than he thinks about his local diocesan clergy, right? So I think that he depends on the local Jesuit superior to kind of look to kind of be in charge of these Jesuits and make sure that we stay in line or whatever. I think that in general, bishops try not to meddle too much. But I mean, my local bishop knows me. I know him. We see each other. I'm going to see him tomorrow. In fact, for the Feast of St. Ignatius Loyola, he's going to be consecrating a brand new chapel that is on Loyola's campus, and so he'll be there. And we know each other. He doesn't often call me for to instruct me or tell me to do anything. But for example, I needed his permission to become bi-ritual. To be able to serve two bishops actually in my local area. Anytime we're going to do something as a high school, he might think that, hey, even though Jesuit isn't run by an order, I still want all of the high schools in my archdiocese to operate a certain way. So we, safe environment training, for example, he gets to decide what kind of safe environment training we have to submit ourselves to, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, bishops are important to us. I hope that helps answer your question. Saint Ignatius, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Counter deformer. Amen. I'm good at praying for others and helping my children with their night prayers, but I'm terrible at praying myself. Well, I think there's a lot of virtue in doing things that you don't necessarily feel like you're getting the most out of, or you're doing the best or anything like that. Like if by that, I'm terrible at praying myself, meaning that you don't pray, that would be very, very bad. If what you mean is I pray, but it's sometimes very dry, sometimes I'm kind of just pushing through, something like that, I would say join the club. Not every prayer is going to be that way. But even if you have kind of like a sustained time in your life where prayer is not all that you want it to be, there is still virtue in the mortification involved in setting time aside and saying, I'm going to pray this way. And I think it's very simple. If you say, I'm going to pray something like an examen every day, I think you should pray every time before you eat any food, right? I think it's a very good practice. I think that you should pray for people who ask you to pray. Like, for example, I have people ask me to pray for them all the time. At the very minimum, no matter what, if I find out that somebody has suffered some tragedy, even people I don't know, I might even be reading like a headline in the newspaper about people who died from, a tsunami, from an earthquake or whatever it is. I will pray a Hail Mary for that person. And by the end of the day, I've prayed, 100 Hail Marys or whatever, just at different times of the day, because I saw a time when I thought I should pray. I felt moved to pray for these people. And I don't think any of those Hail Marys are like where in the middle of the Hail Mary, I'm having an ecstatic vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I'm, praying, crying tears or anything like that. But I do think there's something right and good about all that. Now, if you want to beef up that prayer, I think the Angelus is great. You want to beef that up even more, try praying the Rosary daily. If you really want to beef that up, I think one of the best things even lay people could do is pray the Divine Office, the Liturgy of the Hours. If you don't know what that is, every priest is supposed to be praying this every day. You're praying basically 5 different prayers every day, plus an invitatory psalm. And it's a liturgy, right? So there's a very liturgical nature to it. There are, you're supposed to be standing at certain parts and making the sign of the cross at certain parts. And, if you can help it, do it in a chapel if you can. And I think now you're talking about this will supercharge your spiritual life. The Divine Office, the Liturgy of the Hours. it's an excellent practice. And when you start to pray at those different times a day, by the time it's got just the right prayers that you need in the morning, and just the right prayers you need midday, and just the right prayers you need in the evening, and then what's called the office of readings, right? So that there's an expanded part there that's going to have readings from the early church fathers and from the councils and all that. All those things are going to really enrich your life, and it's good prayer. And no one of them is so long that like you're gonna say, oh, I can't manage to do this. Like, you should be able to pray each piece of this for, in probably in under 15 minutes. So, you should have little, and you can really break up your day in little parts. So let's say you just decide that you're going to get to work every day 15 minutes early. And while you're still in the parking lot, I'm going to pray that, you're going to pray that, that morning prayer, or whatever prayer that the time is right for. That'll change your life. It really, really will. But if you can't do all that, and all you can do is squeeze in is a rosary, that's fantastic as well. That's been known to really make holy people. All right. Let's see here. Thanks for the answer, Father. One last question. Do you have any time for hobbies? God bless you, Father. Have a great night. Do I have any time for hobbies? I don't know if it qualifies as a hobby. I mean, I'm sort of a wannabe artist, right? So every now and then I find myself creating little art pieces for one thing or another. I don't get to see my family all that often. When I do, it's usually surrounding some kind of other thing that I have to do during the day in that part of the state. So a lot of Jesuits get assigned all over the world. I just happen to be assigned 2.5 hours away from where I grew up. That's a very rare thing for Jesuits, but it just happens to be the case right now. So every now and then I get to go in and see my family if I have something to do in that part of the state. And when I do, at night, I go hunting, right? So we hunt for wild feral hogs that destroy all of our crops and are an invasive species. The state of Louisiana hopes that we absolutely kill the entire population. There's no season for them. They want us to kill as many of them as we can, and they taste good. So I do some nighttime hunting with my brothers. I would consider that a hobby in the sense that, preparing for those nights of hunting hogs at night with the thermal imaging camera and all that is a whole lot of fun for me. It's really part of my job, but I love it. I attend a lot of high school sports, right? So I go to a lot of basketball games and football games and soccer, and every now and then golf and tennis, once in a while, whenever I can get a chance for those kinds of things, wrestling matches, all that. It's a part of my job I love. I don't know. Some people might consider that a hobby. It's a part of my job that I absolutely love. I love to read. I love reading books whenever I get the chance. If I ever have a long drive to go somewhere, I like audiobooks. I find myself very rarely, though, doing something that isn't going to enrich my ability to minister well, right? So apart from hog hunting, okay, we got that. But, listening to podcasts on the road, reading, those kind of things I think make me a better minister to the people that I minister to. And I find myself just very drawn to those kinds of activities. Those are really my very favorite things to do, would be the kind of things that make me a better priest. Right. So I hope that's helpful. Axiom of choice. That's very nice. I've now been at it for what looks like is 45 minutes or so. So maybe now wouldn't be a bad time to wrap things up. I would just say that, I love being a Jesuit, and tomorrow, the 31st, is the Feast of St. Ignatius Loyola. So if you can pray for the Jesuit order, I think we could use your prayers for sure. Vocations wise, we're doing okay, but we could always do a whole lot better. I think that the world could benefit greatly from what St. Ignatius Loyola has to offer the church. I think that that there's never been a better time to be a Jesuit in a lot of ways, right? Maybe not in every way, but in a whole lot of ways, there's never been a better time for a man to offer God himself at in the order of the Society of Jesus, and do a lot of the good work that's needed out there. I think St. Ignatius Loyola, he really has his foot in two different worlds, right? So he's born in 1491 thereabouts. So he's got his world in that, he's got one foot in that world of sort of the medieval Christianity, and with, knights and dragons and princesses and all, that whole kind of world. And then he's got this other foot in what is the very beginning of the modern period, the Renaissance, in Europe. And I think that way that he straddles those two worlds, I feel like right now, here we are in the postmodern period, and I think there's just a lot to offer this time from that spot that he was in the course of history. So especially his method of prayer, where we are taking symbols and scripture and things that we meditate and contemplate that help us to understand, make sense of the world, but also be formed by them, right? To be formed by by the way that we pray with meditations and contemplations. I just think that's what the world needs this, and right now the world needs it. So let's see. I have a couple more questions. I'll just answer them real quick. Are there any traditions Jesuits do on the feast of St. Ignatius? Well, because we're spread so far and wide, the way we do community in most cases is maybe a little bit different from what many people might imagine, right? So you might imagine the Benedictines, they're all coming in to eat supper together. And I stayed at a Benedictine monastery one time, and it was just absolutely awesome. So every guy would like dip his hand in the holy water, and he would touch the next guy's hand, and then that guy would dip his hand in the holy water and touch the next guy's hand. And so it was like they were all serving each other. They would all pull the chair out for the guy next to them. So it was like a way of them serving each other. All that community life is beautiful. The fact is, for Jesuits, there's a different kind of community that we live in. Like, I live with several Jesuits, and we see each other every day, but we don't pray the office together. For example, we because we're out there saying masses out in the community all over the place, we say mass together as a community only once a week. So for us to be able to say, hey, on the 31st, we're going to get together all the Jesuits in the surrounding areas. So several Jesuits, we're all going to come in. So take somebody like a Jesuit like Mitch Pacwa, who is out in Irondale, Alabama. He's going to come into a Jesuit community, I'm almost positive, to be able to celebrate that day with them. And we just try to get together in a bigger sense. And I know all the Jesuits in the area, at least a little bit. So we all get together and we all pray together. Tomorrow, we're going to be with the bishop, consecrating a brand new chapel that's on Loyola's campus. So we'll be doing that, sort of feasting on that day. But then I've also got to go back to work. Tomorrow's a work day for me as well. So it's not special in that sense that I have my regular things that I got to do in my job as president of Jesuit High School too. So that's the way that goes. Anyway, pray for us. We need it. And if you know anybody that you think has the spirit of St. Ignatius Loyola, that's the guys that we ought to be looking at for vocation. So if you know anybody that might have a Jesuit vocation, have them look at the Jesuit saints and say, do you think that God is calling you to be like them? Do you want the formation that those guys got? Do you want the spirituality that those guys got? I don't think you'll find that in a higher supply than what you'll find in the Society of Jesus. So God bless everybody, and St. Ignatius Loyola, pray for us. Good night.